Hello, everyone. Dr. Carl here. In today's program, I thought we would investigate and study the subconscious, if not Freudian, connection between Tchaikovsky's great concern over his particular sexual proclivities and the fact that Bach, a man with 20 children, wore a wig. For you people getting us on cable, we understand some of the stations are still, some of the cities only getting 30 minutes at a time, and when this happens, to bring up to date, the first half of most of these, we're taping an hour at a time. We're taking up by reading a collection each night of what's known as Kyroots papers, and Kyroots said it's a bunch of epigrams and fables and aphorisms, myths, metaphors, rumors, legends, tales, historical footnotes, maxims, axioms, travel tips, allegories, parables, and other stuff. And as they're being read, each one, believe it or not, is numbered using the Arabic system of numbers and mostly in sequence. And as they're being read off camera on a screen, the number is being flashed, and those here in the studio audience who find a particular page to be of some interest, they write down the number, then they're put on this sheet, and then they have selected me for this evening. And Kyroot, off stage, down the prompter's box, we read the ones that were requested, and with his gracious permission, perhaps I try to make some comment, notwithstanding the fact of that smartass who wrote in about what he thought was going on. Okay, and Kyroots said, here we go. The primary world has no tears, but is a carrier. Now, those of you who've been watching, you know, us talking about the primary and the secondary world. The primary world would be, if it were possible under today's conditions, it would be that world, that kind of existence for a human that would be absolutely minimal. It would be that which would be undeniably necessary. Just food, drink, and shelter, that sort of thing, which is no longer sufficient, but you understand what I'm saying on a strictly physical level, you could stay alive in that way. And the secondary world is that which, once a man's neural system is fired up somewhere above the top of his brain stem, that he can actually think and talk, then you are, whether you want to or not, you are a proud participant in the secondary world. So people believe that they have all sorts of sufferings in life. And nowadays, as we were pointing out last time we were here, in fact, it is secondary ills that take up man's real area of concern nowadays. I know that people get sick, and you can be hurt, and you can break a bone and cut yourself. But that, people treat it nowadays. You have these med clinics down the corner now, advertising, giving out green stamps, free parking, you know, bowling teams in your neighborhood. Being hurt nowadays is nothing, physically. That would be a primary. I know it can hurt and etc., but it's not considered of any great importance, at least in our part of the world. Because those ills that they have not conquered, by God, they're out there working on them. Just send them some more money. The ills that concern man, those that are of real interest, are the secondary ills. That's the only thing that people really feel to be of any consequence, the more they are a secondary creature, the more they are civilized. So what I suggest, if Kyroots does not interfere and stop me, is the primary world has no tears. It's back to this. A wounded hippo, an elephant with a thorn in its foot, does not cry. And I can push you a little bit further, if you can play the metaphor game between two streams right quick simultaneously. If an elephant was a participant, a particular elephant, in a sad love affair that didn't work out, so that to try and push a physical creature out of the physical realm, which we're being silly, but still, an elephant cannot cry. There are no tears in the primary world. But then Kyroots says there are no tears there, but it's a carrier. Now then, if we had Freudians here, if we had good psychologists, good reasonable people, and they were trying to follow this, they could say, aha, you have stepped in it. Because now you're saying that it is some kind of subconscious, it is some kind of unconscious traumas, forgotten episodes in one's life that cause one now to have emotional problems as parabolized in your reference to tears. No, it's not quite that simple. The primary world cannot cry. It just simply cannot. There are no tears there. It is a matter, as another Kyroots later tonight pointed out, in part, there are no debilitating diseases, there are no gradual declines in the physical world. He was doing it in another context. It's either the grand affair of here today, gone tomorrow. Do or die. You're either standing up, you could be bleeding, you could be wounded, but if you're standing up and breathing, that's one thing in the primary world. There's only a second thing in the primary world, and that is, boy, Fred's been laying there for a long time. It's been, what now, several months now, and he hadn't breathed at all? It's that. It's here today, gone tomorrow. Do or die. So there are no tears. But Kyroots points out, the primary world has no tears, but it's a carrier. The problem, from a more complex view of ordinary people, trying to jump in if I got you too confused, if it was an ordinary, psychologically inclined, civilized, sane person, and say, well, that's exactly the sorts of things we talk about in psychology. It's not. See, because they say that there is some input, at least, from the secondary world. They call it the environmental problems. Not in the biological sense necessarily, but in the sense that if you're now crying, metaphorically, you're hurt, metaphorically, you're injured in the secondary sense, that is emotionally. We're not talking about broken bones, and we're not talking about the unsightly curse of, what is it, eczema? We're talking about emotional scars, emotional hurts. The world is arranged in such a way in man that ordinary people, no matter how sophisticated, is the cutoff line between being ordinary and not being ordinary. Not crazy, but not being ordinary. And that is the one I've been through before. If you ask anyone, what percentage, what kind of balance would they put between the influence of one's biology as one's heredity, how much weight would you give that as opposed to the kind of impact that your life, the environment, the circumstances have had on your life? And this is a real short quiz because it's instantaneous. If they hesitate for a second, if they don't laugh in your face, if they go, then the quiz is over. Those of you who need to do it, but you don't need to. They would say that there are tears, but it's not the basis of the primary world. They would admit, well, yeah, losing a family member, having death take away someone, having your husband or wife leave you, even losing a job that you've cherished. That can hurt you. I'll read it again. The primary world has no tears, but it's a carrier. Could I try it one more way? Yeah? Only ordinary people, that is, sane, civilized, educated people, look to the human element in life for any possible cause, even influences, partial causes, to human problems. I guess if you need any, those of you watching on television, if you need any possible additional ammo to feel as though that you are suddenly estranged in a most unusual way from your television, more than usual, and there it is. So don't feel weird. Should I try to repeat that if I could? It's only the ordinary, it's only the sane, it is those people to whom Kyroots is not addressing this, who believe that humans have any input, any possible, even little pogita influences, inputs into human problems. Any. That's the cutoff line. That's the quiz. Is ask a man. Do you think there is any cultural, social influences on the development of a person, of an individual? I mean, just any. Well, I don't know whether it impresses you, but it is the world's, it's two things. It's the world's shortest quiz, and it's the world's most important quiz. Because the answer is the slightest show of hesitation. I mean, the slightest indication that the person might give it some thoughtful reflection. The quiz is over. Ring the bell. Let the world out. Everybody go to recess. And Kyroots said, there are more that we're going to get to, I'm sure, but I guess you noticed tonight, I did, sitting there hearing it, there were interspersed throughout all this was many allusions tonight to dancing. And they were all sort of tied together the way I heard it. I didn't make a few notes. Why did I say that? But at any rate, so I don't guess we're going to get them all, even if they were requested. But so I just pointed that out, that dance, to refresh your memory, hit several areas tonight. And Kyroots said, when you dance real close to somebody, you can end up doing part of their dancing also. If I wanted to take enough time, some ordinary psychologically trained or inclined, just ordinary person could say, well, that's true. But now you're beginning to talk about, now that I think about it, that's a great new term. It's been around a while, this codependency. And I'm sure they'd say, well, that's all you're getting at, is that you can end up, if you're in a relationship, which they'd say, I bet that's what you mean by dancing. Maybe you caught me, maybe not. That all you're talking about is some kind of codependency, that you get involved emotionally with other people, that you need them. I like the way Kyroots put it. Nobody asked me, now I say it, I'm sorry. But isn't it interesting? That if you dance real close to somebody, you can end up doing part of their dancing also. And if Kyroots does not try and throw a sharp object at me, I can put it this way. Under all ordinary conditions, you cannot dance with somebody else without doing that. And, to go a bit further, is where it falls over the kind of revolutionist edge into the hands, back in the hands of ordinary people, is then when psychology says, yes, and there's where you have the problem. That is, that you do end up doing part of somebody else's dancing. See, they see that as a problem. And Kyroots sort of pointed it out. He didn't put it in those words, but it's, even though that smart ass that wrote tonight thought I was in charge of trying to add modifiers and adjectives to dress up some of this starkness, Kyroots just simply pointed out that that's what happens. What if it is the indication being, or what if you see for yourself, not that he or any of us are stating some absolute verbal, irrefutable fact, but what if you saw for yourself that the whole matter of dancing with somebody else makes it inescapable that you're going to do part of their dancing? But then you follow it, muddied up again, that ordinary people, ordinary minds could hear that and go, yeah, I can buy some of that. But then, right after that, it is even a tacit certainty that is at least some sort of psychological, it's not a huge problem, it's a certain kind of neurosis. Or it's a potential problem. It's something that should not be done. You should not be in a relationship to somebody else and dancing, and part of the time you got to hold them up. Or you got to say, well, you look tired, put your feet on my feet and I'll dance for both of us for a while. They'd say, no, that's that kind of codependency, that's no real kind of relationship. It should, by God, be what? 50-50. Folks, 50-50 exists, I'm sure, somewhere. They still publish Mad Magazine? Batman? In your dreams? In your religion? Again, you have the kind of situation where nothing wrong. This is not a criticism of psychology, as you know. But again, you have an area where the world, where man's contemporary, civilized, best thought, his collective wisdom in psychology and just common thinking, common sense nowadays tells you that that kind of codependency, that sort of dance that you're in with somebody else, and you end up, or they do, either way, but that one of the partners ends up doing more than 50% of their share, then you have a problem. And that sort of description nowadays, and it's not all that new, of course, but the way I'm trying to use psychological kinds of jargon or pictures, no one but a fool, no one but an ordinary idiot nowadays would stand up and say, well, that's a bunch of bunk. It isn't accepted, it is reality, it's a fact in the secondary world. Except if you see what I was pointing at least what Kyroots was trying to point at, again you have the area where, rightfully so, in life they're saying, well, here is a problem. Here is something that should be fixed. Whereas Kyroots pointing out, the son of a bitch is running like a top. While acknowledging the fact everybody else says, well, look at that poor bus, or look at that poor car, or that man and woman, that nice couple driving by, but they don't seem to realize that one of the tires is flat on one side of the tire, the bottom part. That's for people from Alabama. Kyroots acknowledges that. He doesn't point it out. It's not a criticism. He simply points out that other people say that's true. And he understands. He's saying, yeah, I know. They think the car is whizzing by, the people are dancing, and if you look good, one of them, the man or the woman, as it normally is, that one of them's kind of limping. Or that the man's got his left foot on her right foot, and she's doing, like, what would that be, 3/4 of the dancing instead of 50%. He's just acknowledging that, yes, that is the common diagnosis nowadays. That's a common observation. The car is flying by, and one of the tires is a little flat just on one side. Except then Kyroots pointing out, if you can see it, the son of a bitch is just running like a top. You couldn't do any better. Yes, said a viewer, but no. That's what the viewer said. Well, there was another series tonight. This didn't seem to strike people, but if you didn't notice, I guess, regardless of that guy that wrote, maybe some of this I am having to explain, but Kyroots just had several in the last night or two that a speaker was saying something, and then some guy in the audience was nudging somebody with him and asking him, did he say, it started out, if I recall, that some guy, a speaker somewhere at some kind of, God knows what kind of convention or something, got up and said that he believed that when your back was turned, rats stuck their head up out of the water in your toilet when you weren't looking. And that some guy punched a kid with him or somebody and said, did he say toilet or mind? If I remember, that's how this started. At any rate, somebody asked, we're just getting to the first one that started tonight, and you have to remember, well, of course you don't have to. Yeah, Kyroots said you did have to. I didn't think you did. You got to keep that in mind for some of this to continue to flow on, if it do. And there were several tonight, but this one started out. And Kyroots said, a speaker between the salad and the soup said to the convention, vultures are their own reward. I hate to rub it in, but there is an old axiom that's very close to that, and the first word, in fact, starts with a V. But at any rate, this writer says vultures instead of this other word that's more commonly known. Vultures are their own reward. And a man in the audience elbowed his nephew and said, did he say vultures? And the nephew said, yeah, Unc, he did. That was the first one. I'm not going to stop there, but they press on if we get to them. And Kyroots said, a chap sitting in the park who said he's seen many of our shows says he's decided that the mind of a revolutionist, whatever that's what you mean by that, would either be like an infinite ocean or else a beached whale. And he says either way, thanks, but no thanks. And the addendum is his brain lad that was in charge of thinking for him added. I remember that part. Added, yeah, when I go home at night, I want to know there will be a home. I don't know about you. We don't have but a few minutes, and I don't have to talk myself into it. The addendum, the part at the bottom, is, believe it or not, connected to some eyes directly with the first part. Would you care to look under the S's right quick? How about a definition of stable, sane, or civilization? What's the mind going to say? When I go home, the guy's already said thanks but no thanks. He about covered it, that this revolutionist thinking are thinking more than you have to. He didn't ask for my support, but I'll go ahead. I'm just speaking when I say I'm speaking for all of y'all, you right-thinking people. He's about covered it. He says that the mind of the revolutionist, he figures from all this, would either be like an infinite ocean, infinite, or a beached whale. That about, within one parabolic picturization, that about covers the extreme. And he says, thanks but no thanks. And his mind added later down the addendum, he said, yeah, when he said I, but he meant we. He meant the brain and the guy. See, they go together. He said, yeah, when I go home at night, I want to know there's going to be a home. Huh? How would you like to fool around and you could fall into some kind of revolutionist toilet trap? And you began to try to think like this, and you went, well, and you got from your TV tonight or from here in the audience, and you went home, and you got home, and there wasn't no home. And I ain't talking about your damn house or apartment. Oh. Don't give me that old crap. You knew I wasn't. These two are connected, and Kyroots said, creativity doesn't have to try and look ahead. It has no alternative. And a nearby man who heard that thought, history has got to be the stupor mundi, the wonder of the world, the magnificent example of plagiarism. And he further thought, if that be true at the collective level, then a man's memory is likewise at the individual level. I'm sure I can safely leave that one with you. 45 seconds. And Kyroots said, even just the attempt to think more than you have to and regrets are like the matter and antimatter of a rebel's universe. The only thing I can point out with the few seconds we got left, to take the great comparison, the easy one, it's usually religion, but nowadays you could do it in the social sciences, psychology, psychiatry. If you speak about regret, it would seem to be a reasonable city emotion. Almost inescapable, extremely humane, predictable, understandable. And yet, according to Kyroots, in that one, something ain't right. Ready to switch to audio then?